Parents of Reddit, what was your worst parenting mistake? I was far too fearful and now they are fearful. 3-year-old woke up in the middle of the night and came to tell me she had a bad dream. I walked her back to her room and talked to her about her dream. She said she was dreaming there were bugs crawling on the walls and in her bed. I told her that it was just a dream and the bugs only existed in her head. She didn't get back to sleep for a long time after being told she had bugs in her head. Edit for clarity, she's going to be 6 in a few weeks and she was not mentally scarred by this incident. 5 months old. He'll be fine. He can't roll over yet. Places baby in middle of king-sized bed and proceeds to finish getting ready for work. Thump. He could, in fact, roll over. I'm sure there are more, but that's the one that really stands out. The other day some lady cut me off and then stopped in the middle of the lane to turn left despite there being a turn lane. I yelled, "You fucking asshole." Then I hear this tiny voice come from the back of my car, "What's a fucking asshole?" And that was the day I taught my 2.5-year the word fucking and the word asshole. After my daughter spent all her own money on a skateboard, I relayed to her that I was afraid that one of the times she fell off a board she'd get hit by a car. In less than 2 days she didn't try anymore. I don't know if she had a scare or just didn't want me to worry, but I feel like I took one of the most physical hobbies she could have had away from her by projecting my own fear. She doesn't gravitate toward physical activity much now as a young adult. Well, we're only at age 1.5, so we haven't had any major ones yet, but teaching my toddler how to throw out her own trash has proven disastrous for the things in our house that are inert garbage, but make their way into the trash anyway. Most recently, her favorite stuffed puppy who was missing for a good chunk of time. Woo boy. When my first son was a few months old, I took him out to the woods to get some air and see how he reacts to the birds and trees and dirt and stuff. Soon I had a curious idea, because I know babies have really great grip strength. I put him up to a low thin branch, so if he fell he wouldn't fall too far, and put his hands against the branch. Sure enough he latched on. Then I slowly let go and admired my creation. A baby on a branch. Magnificent. Then I wondered if he'd be able to do a pull-up. I said, "Do a pull-up." He didn't. Probably because he was only 4 months old and couldn't understand English very well. Then I picked him up again and pulled his hands off the branch. I let him play in the dirt for a while and then we went home. About a year later, when he started talking, I started giving him cookies whenever he would say daddy. I think that triggered some sort of Pavlovian response because now he won't shut up. My son is a freshman in college, and I thought I covered all my bases, but I realized during Thanksgiving that I never taught him how to shave. I probably forgot, because I have a beard, so I don't really shave all that often, but he definitely is not ready to sport one as well. When he walked in the door, my wife asked me why our son looked like Ted Cruz. Oh man, one time my wife and I took our son on a trip to the harbor, since he was now old enough to go with us on these trips. After a fun-filled day we were driving back home, and my wife glanced in the backseat and goes, "There's our son." I guess we were not used to having a third person with us when we went out, so that is the story of how we almost forgot our child. Neither of my parents have read it, but they have told me this has been their biggest mistake with me of all time. I was a kid about 14, and I was riding my bike in the front yard. Anyway, I end up falling over onto the ground on my bike while standing up and not moving. Long story short, it feels like I've just been drop kicked in my balls. So I head inside and lay on the couch in pain for a while. Ask my parents to take me to the hospital and they refused. Told me I was just being a baby and that the pain would go away. About an hour and a half later, and many tears, they finally agreed to take me in. Turns out I had given myself a testicular torsion and the lack of blood to that area of my body meant I was going into emergency surgery. I lost a testicle the same day less than 10 minutes later. Never forgave them for it. Choosing my first wife to be the mother of my oldest child. She was beautiful and interesting, but she had severe mental health problems that she flat out refused to treat in any way except for large amounts of alcohol and copious piles of Xanax. I tried for a few years to make things work, but after coming home to find that she'd sent the nanny home, gotten trashed and passed out on the kitchen floor while my 2-year-old was totally unsupervised, we packed up and left. She hasn't even bothered staying in touch and is still exactly the same 16 years later. I wish I'd chosen a more stable, mentally sound person to marry and have a child with. It's caused my daughter a lot of anxiety and worry. My biggest regret is telling my, now teenaged, toddler to sing real songs instead of letting her just sing nonsense. Not locking up pills. My daughter was maybe 2 on a camping trip. We had one of those MF pill holders with some anti-anxiety medicine in it. She got into it while we were unloading the minivan. We noticed some of the pills were missing. We're almost to the and we noticed them laying on the floor bed. Kids will find anything unless a parent asks them. Edit for clarity. Had I known people would read it, I might have proofread. Not parent, but when I was 7 my parents told me I killed my grandpa. Here's how the story goes. My mom and dad are super superstitious, and they have this thing against white. In my culture white is used in funerals. Soul-loving people are not allowed to wear white on their heads, hats, bows, hairbands etc. Anyway, so one day I was playing with white thread and it got stuck in my hair. As soon as my mom saw, she ripped it out and yelled at me. Within a week of this incident my grandpa, who was on the other side of the earth, died by slipping on something and hitting his head. My parents said that because I was playing with white thread on my head, that is what caused my grandpa to die. As a 7-year-old I lived with the guilt of murder for 10 years. I love listening to music in the car, and some of the music obviously features some naughty or dubious words. When I had my young son in the car I would always skip certain songs, but occasionally one slipped through the net. Cue Sex on Fire by Kings of Leon. He got home one day and parroted parts of the song, and I was desperately trying to distract him so he would forget it, but he didn't. I had the bright idea of trying to get him to change the word to something else. He was still in the early speaking stage, so everything sounded slightly garbled. Anyway, I had success with the word oh for about a day or so. He then just wandered around singing about how his shed was on fire. Then he forgot and moved on to something else, and my mortal fear of him saying it had chilled subsided. I have not played that song in my car since, and it has been many years. Put my son, who was about 8 months old at the time, onto our changing table that is about waist high, and turned around to grab more diapers. Terrible decision. Caught him rolling off the table out of the corner of my eye, but it was too late. He fell 3 feet, landed directly on his face, and did a full scorpion. Henner's never cried so hard in his life before or after. I held him and just started crying because I felt so guilty hurting him like that. Expecting my first to be potty trained way earlier and way easier than she actually was, it turned me into an unrecognizable monster, to be completely honest. Not the kind of parent I strive to be. It was a complete months-long disaster. Now potty training my second, and it helps so much that I've waited until she was almost 3. So, my immediate family celebrates Christmas, but in a completely secular way. We don't do baby Jesus or Santa Claus, and have expressed to the kids it's just a time to be generous with one another. My youngest started kindergarten and started asking if Santa Claus was real, since a number of their friends believed in Santa. I explained to her that no, Santa wasn't real, but was a myth, based on a street Nicholas who had been a real person. At which point my kid asked me if we could visit Street Nick, and I explained that we couldn't because he has died hundreds of years ago. The next day I got a very upset call from their kindergarten teacher because my kid was running around telling their classmates that Santa Claus was dead. Teaching her how to blow a raspberry before teaching her how to eat food was not a smart move. Not a parent, but my mom tells me the biggest mistake she ever made was letting my grandmother babysit me during the summer and non-school days. She didn't know that a live-in resident had been raping and torturing me for years. She didn't know that my grandmother knew it was going on and beat me over it. She didn't know that my grandmother assaulted me on a regular basis and blamed me for everything that went wrong. I'm a handbasket of anxiety disorders and I don't want kids now. My mom will call me out of the blue and just start apologizing for leaving me with my grandmother and that if she had known what was going on, she would have quit her job and just been a stay-at-home mom. My mom never let me go out with my friends because she was afraid of me getting abducted, so when the time came that I did not have to ask her anymore I was too scared to go out.